And she's like, you want to know why? You want to know why he has to give you your files? He has to give you his files. So she's actually read the law and found out. But that part is so. Yeah, that is something you wouldn't really expect in a lawyer movie. That kind of insight.
We are the Armed Attorneys. We are answering more of your questions. This is the best kind of stuff. We love these things, but we're going to be talking about braced pistols, non-resident licenses, what's going on with the Smith & Wesson case out of New Mexico, and some fun ones. So much more. If you enjoy this stuff, make sure to leave your question in the comment section down below. If you like someone else's question, make sure to give those a thumbs up so that those filter to the top. This is where we source most of these questions. But before we begin, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting that like button. Mr. Edwin Walker, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for asking.
We've spent a lot of time, Emily and I, we both kind of cycle in and out of the Austin state area, the capital. We got a lot of gun laws moving around and, just scheduling. This works out. Edwin's here today. If you're, we always get that question. Where's Emily? Or if I'm not here, not as frequently, but where's Richard every now and then?
They never ask where you are at.
No, but they're
only concerned.
They do
with
miss
Emily.
you. They like you.
They're only concerned with Emily.
Yeah, for the most part, that's true. So, all right, let's start off this segment with a question from 300-Pound Gorilla. Can you guys please tell me, if I have an AR pistol with a brace and shoulder it while I'm shooting, am I going to be breaking the law or committing a crime?
Well,
we kind of touched on this in the last video, but I wanted to address it again. It comes up so frequently.
Okay, so the one thing I can tell you is that it really does come down to your intent. So, did you intend to use it as a shoulder to fired from the shoulder weapon? Obviously, nobody knows what goes into your mind at the time, but I will tell you, just whatever you do, please don't film it. Just don't film it. Do not put it on the YouTube. Don't draw attention to yourself by going, hey, look at me. I want to show you how easy it is to install an arm brace and use it as a shoulder stock. Obviously, that would get you in a fair amount of trouble.
Yeah, and we talked about this at length in our last video. We'd encourage you to check it out for a more in-depth discussion about it. But really what we're looking at is the definition of rifle. Is it designed, redesigned, made or remade, and intended to be fired from the shoulder? That is a fact issue, because what's criminal is the unregistered possession of the item. That's the crime. The crime isn't shouldering, but the shouldering could be evidence that it's designed to be fired from the shoulder. And there's a lot of nuance there, and I know a bunch of alarm bells are going off. The armed attorneys say SPRs or the brace pistols are illegal. No, that's not what we're saying. We're just saying, hey, look, this is a factor the government is likely going to bring up in court. So for God's sakes, don't post it on your Facebook.
Yeah, I would say that the two things that if you are truly worried about this, if you're like, look, I got this arm brace, I'm really terrified that the ATF, but I still like to operate on the fringes of the law, and I like to have this, and it is nice and it's cool. Maybe I do have a medical issue, a physical issue that I have to use it as an arm brace as it's intended. The two things that I will tell you, please just don't modify it in any way.
Yep, absolutely.
And don't film yourself.
Yeah, there we go. And
how simple is that?
And we're waiting on clarification from the Department of Justice, the Trump administration. How are they going to be treating braces going forward? Right now, the current state of the law, we're operating off of the United States Code. We don't have all this extra criteria that goes in that factors it that the ATF's looking at. But does that stuff still come up in court? Yeah, even if the factors aren't built into the law, those factors absolutely would be admissible in court, so just be careful. All right, next question we have is from KD2488. If I have a non-resident CCW in another state, can I carry in my home state?
Well, the answer to this depends specifically on your state law. And I'll give you an example. Here in Texas, Texas does not make a distinction of whether or not you are a resident or non-resident of the license in which you carry. So many folks here in Texas have non-resident, even though they're residents of the state of Texas, they have Florida licenses, they have Arizona licenses. Utah used to be a popular one, and the state of Texas doesn't care. Over the years, there have been a couple of legislative attempts to say that residents of the state of Texas have to have a Texas license in order to be able to carry, but none of those have gone anywhere. Now, let's contrast that with Louisiana. So Louisiana does specifically have a law that says if you are a resident of Louisiana, then you have to have a Louisiana license to be able to carry under their law. Now, just to make sure, we're not, we're dealing specifically with this nuance. We're not talking about constitutional carry or
Yeah, because
permitless
they might
carry or
still be
anything
allowed
else.
to carry otherwise. Yeah,
Correct.
not talking about that.
But if you want to carry, if Louisiana has certain privileges that license holders get, a resident of Louisiana have to have a Louisiana license. But it only applies to Louisiana residents. So, for example, you are a Texan, you have a non-resident Florida license. You can still carry in Louisiana because they recognize Florida licenses. They're not going to do the residency thing on you because you're a resident of Texas.
Yeah, one more example would be Texan with a Florida license. Well, they're not a resident of the state of Florida. There are some states that say, hey, we only recognize licenses and permits issued by the state in which you're a resident. So we got our Texan with a Florida license. Maybe the state of Colorado doesn't recognize their license. You can see how this is a little muckety, but it's going to depend on your state law.
Yeah. So that at the end of the day, that's what controls every state that I'm familiar with. They do, if they choose to want to have some sort of restriction on resident licenses, they have put it in their laws. Check the laws. If there's no language there, then all you got to do is check to see whether or not that state recognizes the license that you are in fact carrying. They don't care about your residence.
Good law interpretation principle for folks who are, maybe you're amateurs looking at this stuff. Maybe you have a little bit of experience. The law doesn't necessarily tell us what we can do. It tells us what we can't do generally. And so you don't see that provision, you're likely good to go. All right, next one we have, this is Mark McCracken, 4308, channel member. Thank you, Mark, as always. What is considered a school structure under law for a license to carry holder? This is, I'm going to talk about it in Texas specific terms and general terms, because I think a lot of people, this is important to know. And this came up in discussion of our Frisco incident. Unfortunately, someone lost their life and another person is claiming self-defense. Is that a good self-defense claim? Probably not. We talk about it in length if you want to check out that video. But when we're looking at your state's law, I think it's important to know, hey, when we have, let's say, a list of statutorily prohibited places, these are places that, hey, you couldn't carry a weapon, firearm, a club, knife, it's your state's law is going to depend, but it matters how your law phrases it. If they say premises, if they say grounds, if they say location, and you want to know, hey, are any of those terms defined? Well, in Texas, we do that. We define premises. And for our list of statutorily prohibited places, we say, hey, the premises of, let's say, for example, a school. And what do we mean when we use that term? We mean building or a portion of a building. That's what we mean in Texas law. Buildings, generally, when we have our list of prohibited places, that's what we're talking about, unless we specify otherwise. So for an example of an otherwise specified location would be, we say school-sponsored activities on the grounds that are owned and under the control of the school. All right, well, we don't use the term premises there. We say location. So check out your state's law. It's important to know how those terms are defined.
Right. And Texas does it really well in this, and I know there are many viewers that are not in Texas, but just using Texas as an example, whenever it does say building or portion of a building, we're very fortunate because they didn't use the word improvements, they didn't use the word structure, anything like that. They specifically used the word building, and then further exclude things to prohibit rogue DAs from arguing, well, building just means you built something. So they're specifically say building, portion building, not including parking lots, sidewalks, walkways,
breezeways.
Right. So they've eliminated all of those. And so what you would do is you would just go to the common definition of building. What is a building? Usually an enclosed structure that people, can enter and exit from. And then, I guess where it does kind of get a little dicey is whenever they do say building or portion of building, which has come in very handy with many courthouse designations, because courts are off limit. Courthouses may not be off limit.
Yeah, that's a discussion for another time. All right, next one we have is John Thomas 2485. This came up, we had a really brief discussion in a previous video about Pro Hoc Beach. Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? There's pros and cons to everything. make an informed decision, do your own research. Not going to comment on any further here, but he said, so you're saying My Cousin Vinny isn't reality. Also, congratulations to New Tiny Human. That's to Emily announcing her next upcoming baby. What do you think about the movie My Cousin Vinny?
Well, I love it. It's one of my favorite movies.
I was going to say, it's probably the most accurate lawyer movie of any lawyer movie I've seen.
But yeah, so with Pro Vici, you usually have to get formal recognition that you are allowed to practice. And obviously, for people who are familiar with My Cousin Vinny, that's one of the key elements
of the plot line.
The plot line is that Vinny has to try that case and finish up by 3 o'clock. Otherwise, he's going to be exposed. Herman Munster will find out who he is and have him arrested. And so that's what he's all worried about. That part, yes, it is. The Pro Hoc Vici part is done a little more formally. And you do usually have to, demonstrate you are licensed in at least some jurisdiction in order to come in. But it's just slightly not reality.
Well, I'll say what that movie does better than most, I'll say, lawyer movies and TV shows is, the way they handle the rules of evidence. I think they actually do a pretty decent job of the rules of evidence in that movie.
Yes, my favorite part, or one of my favorite parts, like I said, I love that movie. But one of my favorite parts is while he's off deer hunting with the prosecutor, of course, Marissa Tomei, Mona Lisa Vito is there reading the actual Alabama Code of Criminal Procedure, and he comes in all proud and pompous. He goes, "Guess what? My hunting trip with the prosecutor, it got me access to all his files. He's going to copy all his files." And she's like, "You want to know why? You want to know why he has to give you your files? He has to give you his files." So she's actually read the law and found out. But that part is so. Yeah, that is something you wouldn't really expect in a lawyer movie. That kind of insight. That yes, in many states the rules of criminal procedure do require full disclosure of the prosecutor's evidence.
Well, compared to like any lawyer movie where like someone's about to confess to a murder on the stand and their attorney's like, "Objection, Your Honor, we've heard enough," and the judge is like, "Sustained." Like that it just doesn't make sense to me. I can't stand that stuff. All right, next one. This is a random question. Applies to Texas, but this is, I think, a good discussion for arbitrary eligibility criteria for licenses. This is I'm not reading that one. Why can't you get a Texas license to carry if you owe child support? These things have nothing to do with each other. It's because the government says so.
Yes. Well, see, the thing about it is the government giveth and the government taketh away. This is something we all know. And whenever it comes to enforce child support, the thing is that the enforcement of child support is extremely important to the state of Texas. And so one of the ways that they have to force people to pay their child support is, you can go through and you can ask for them to be thrown in jail. You can ask for a judgment against them. Sometimes it doesn't really affect people who don't pay their child support. Maybe they're like, "I'll go to jail for not paying my child support. That don't bother me." But one of the remedies is that you can petition the court to have any license that they have taken away by the state. So that would include...
So they can't earn a living, so that they can't pay child support.
Right. So that would include their driver's license. Maybe if they have a barber's license.
I was going to say.
They can take that away.
License to practice law.
License to practice law. It just happens to be that an LTC is one of those licenses that the state issues that they say, look, we're either going to take it or you can't have it, because enforcing child support orders is one of our primary responsibilities, and this is one of the ways we can try to enforce that.
What this ultimately comes down to is states set all kinds of arbitrary criteria when it comes to licenses or permits to carry in your home state. I mean, that's why we got New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin. Why do they do it? Because they're the government. They don't want anybody to be able to defend themselves. They want to have a monopoly on all this stuff. So yeah, it is just completely because I said so. So it's worth noting. All right, next one we have is Julian Sabajian, 1470, channel member. Thank you for being a channel member. When it comes to the New Mexico lawsuit with Smith & Wesson, what's going on? So just a little bit of procedural background just so folks know what's going on. The country of Mexico sued Smith & Wesson in New Mexico, saying, hey, guess what? You're the reason for all of Mexico's problems. A district court dismissed that case. The First Circuit reversed the district court saying, hey, guess what? This can proceed under the Protection and Lawful Commerce and Arms Act, the PLCAA. This is up at the Supreme Court right now. They petitioned for certiorari to review the case. The Supreme Court has accepted it. We're monitoring the case right now. That's what's going on. So we're monitoring that case carefully. Don't really have any updates beyond, hey, guess this is what's going on with it.
Yeah, and it would be, it would probably be a miscarriage of justice if they allowed this suit from Mexico to go through.
Right. I mean, can you imagine all these foreign governments suing all these gun manufacturers in the United States and controlling gun policy? I mean, talk about like, letting the fox into the hen house.
Yeah, it'd be a ridiculous outcome.
Yeah. But we say it every single time. We love these segments, love your questions. Leave them in the section down below. This is where we farm most of them. If you see other folks asking important or questions you want to see answered, make sure to give those a thumbs up. But we hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video. And until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.